to go through like connection. This is such a word that's like thrown around, and it means so many different things with so many different connections, well, interpretations, I should say, for different people. And again, you can see this sort of stuff in the astrology chart. You can see it in numerology. You can see it in human design. We can even feel it. I just think it's more precise when you look at these tools, because it takes the guesswork out. There's specific like traits and qualities that go with each of these signs out of the 12 signs. And there's traits and qualities that go with each of the houses. It just narrows down why you do what you do, why you think the way you think, why you love the way you love, like all of it, right? And so I thought I would talk about connection, because connection is something that, like I said, it's kind of become really general. And we could talk about like emotional connection or physical connection, and everybody's going to see, even in those little subsets, it's still going to be seen as different. And even when you put men and women together, they see this differently. There's a whole bunch of things, and I think I might just stick to emotional connection, because I think it's definitely one of the more important ones. Since we're very emotional beings, people like to act like only women are, when the reality is it's a human thing. Humans are emotional beings. Every single decision that we make, before we make it, during the time that we make it, and even after, we have an emotional state, an emotional reaction. So it's really important to understand your emotions, to understand how you feel at any given moment in all areas of your life. If you don't, you run a strong possibility that you're going to be reactive. You're going to be defensive. You're going to feel exposed. And again, everybody does this differently. But, and again, you can see that as well. There's high vibration, low vibration versions of these. But the more insecure you are, the more uncomfortable emotional connection feels. Now, when we talk about certain signs, this is how we can go deeper emotionally. So the water signs in particular, this is the element that is linked to emotion. So they're going to go deeper. Emotionally, they're going to go deeper than all of the others by a lot. I think Earth also has its, I would say it's more a capacity for depth. It can hold a foundational space for depth. Is it as deep as water emotionally? No. And I find air and fire, other than Leo, is almost allergic to it. It's almost uncomfortable. And the reason I say Leo is the outlier, Leo, just like Cancer, is very much about devotion. And devotion requires emotional connection. It requires that connection of love and the exchange of love. And Leo also values authenticity. And again, authenticity sits in the realm of being able to regulate your emotions. So it is the one exception. I also have to throw Pisces in here. Pisces hits its level. So it's like Leo and Pisces have swapped in a way, not completely, but Pisces, yes, it enjoys the emotional depth and connection, but it hits its point as more like the deeper, heavier types of emotional feelings. Pisces can struggle with these. They can do it for a while, but then they hit their level and then have to vanish. And look, if you're a Pisces and you're watching this and you're like, oh, I'm not like that, I can go deep. Well, it's probably because you have the other two water signs in your chart. Pisces goes deep, but it prefers a lighter, I know like that sounds weird, but I don't mean like lighter, like close to the surface. I mean, it prefers a more optimistic view of things. And a lot of times when it comes to emotions and the emotional regulation, you have to be willing to go to the darker spaces in order to, find that equilibrium. So I personally think, again, if you've got a very fearful Scorpio, they'll be very uncomfortable doing that. They'll probably avoid it. But this is very low vibration stuff, and a Scorpio should work towards being comfortable with it, because it's a transformation sign. It's very productive and helpful in both seeing their own areas that they need to change and grow, as well as helping others. So the sign that's the most comfortable with emotions, of course, is Cancer. Of course, you can get low vibration Cancers who aren't, but this is the domain of Cancer. So wherever you have Cancer in your chart, you're going to be more linked to emotions and how you feel about things. But I still think, because we're emotional beings, it's important to understand. It's important to understand where you have these signs in your chart and where you're going to lean into them. It depends, and it's worth knowing where you're kind of more insecure or where you're more high vibration also. Because this gives you the awareness and the clarity, and the reason why choosing to run away from it leads away from connection is you can't connect, you can't truly be with someone if you're not willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability requires truth. It requires you facing your skeletons in your closet. It requires you to face your guilt and your shame and your embarrassment and your traumas. And that's the only way you can truly connect. Now, it's also, and I said this in, I think, the video the other day, but it's also important to get things that are like chemically disruptive, so drugs, alcohol, get those things out of your relationships also. These things lead to emotional disconnect. And I know some people think that, some of these psychedelics or whatever can help you connect to a deeper part of yourself. I mean, there might be something that you experienced from like a non-physical level. I don't dispute that from your mentality at the time. But drugs do damage to the body and the brain. So though there could be an element of a non-physical benefit, from a physical benefit, it's damaging. And the more times you do it, the more damage you cause. And there's other ways to get those heightened experiences. In fact, it's better to get them by not involving yourself in this stuff. You'll actually get to that clarity quicker. And that's difficult to see because so many people engage in these things. But those lead, especially when it comes to relationships and attraction, partaking in those things lead to disconnect. It's very difficult for you to connect emotionally to yourself, let alone anyone else. So that's something a lot of people don't want to hear, but you're going to have more issues and challenges and whatever if you're doing these things because you're not being yourself, and neither are they. The same goes with watching adult content and porn. A lot of people don't want to hear this, especially men. They don't want to hear it. But it's the truth. When you look at modern times, very modern, in the last, I'd say 5 years, even probably less, just since COVID, the increase in consuming this stuff is leading to people not being able to connect. You actually, if you can watch that stuff, and you can off on it, there's no connection there. There's no emotional connection. You're not engaging with the person who's consenting. You're not engaging with the person who has an emotional connection with you. And that changes the brain. Makes it difficult. You're always looking for something more. You always want, something to take that edge off, something to bring you higher, something to excite you. Just being with a partner isn't enough. And that makes things very difficult then, because there's no connection. You're not connected to yourself, you're not connected to the other person. And I've noticed this does affect men more. And I think it's interesting, with the whole, they think that they need the physical intimacy side more. I don't think that's true. I think that there's more support for that idea in society and support against it for women, which doesn't help either party. But the reality is we do better when we're connecting to the other person emotionally. And if the guy can't do that because his mind has been hijacked from what he's watching, no wonder women don't want to with their partner. And this doesn't just have to be corn or whatever. This can be like if you're a man and you're obsessed with something, like fixing a car, and you spend all your time doing that. You get your dopamine from that. If you're obsessed with playing games, you get it from that. All of these little distractions from facing the truth, from you being able to regulate your emotions and understand how you feel and articulate them, it takes you away from connecting to your partner. So there's all these distractions now. There's all these ways that people aren't facing. I'm not saying it's just men. There's plenty of women who, some partake in corn, but in most cases it's men. But if you do things that take you away from the connection, it becomes very difficult then for you to connect with another person. And you definitely can't connect to yourself because you're looking for all these other things. It's worth knowing astrology charts in these matters because you can see where the lower vibration version of the sign can kind of affect you and why you might lean these directions and how you can kind of pull yourself out of it. Because human beings are wired for emotional connection. We are electrical beings. We are wired to connect to other beings. And if we stop doing that and we only connect to machines and simulations and games and whatever, we no longer do that. And look, maybe that's the way things are moving. Maybe that's how it is, but I still say human beings need these connections. They need these interactions. So I guess how do we find a blend? We don't want to go back to times when we didn't have technology, when we didn't have these things. Modern medicine, this sort of stuff. We don't want to be back at the time when we only had religion and we only had our parents and our pastors and whatever. That wasn't good. But I think it's important to find a way to blend past wisdom and simplicity with modern advancement. Everybody's going to be different in this way as to how they do it. But I think if it's destructive to you or your relationships or the way that you connect or whatever, it's not going to be good. It's not going to help you. It's not going to help who you're with. And so the only way to do that is to face yourself, is to face your insecurities, your vulnerabilities, your pain, everything. Do that and everything else becomes easier. You become less interested in those things because you're only using those to distract yourself from actually doing the work. So if you're doing the work, you don't need the distraction. Life becomes easier then. And I know this because I do it. So I've never been able to get into corn. I'll be honest with you, never. I've had a lot of people show it to me and ask my opinion. To me, there's no emotional nothing. It's fake. The whole thing is fake and fabricated. And it's loud, right? It's loud in the worst way. Other than when I was like a really little kid, I've never really been into games. Again, it's not life. It's just a simulation where you're using something to distract yourself for some time. For what? Now you could come at me and say, what about scrolling? Again, it depends on what you're watching. If you're watching things that help, I guess, change perspectives and open your mind, where you learn things. It isn't just boring scrolling, is it? It isn't just searching for these little hits or whatever. You're learning as you do it. And the interaction between people, talking, learning, and getting the self-destructive things out of your life. The more you do this, the happier you become. I can tell you because I've gotten rid of pretty much all of them. The only one I sort of partake in on occasion is I might have like a sweet or whatever. But even still, I prefer the ones that use like natural sugars, like monk fruit or coconut sugar. They don't hit the system as hard. I do prefer that. But that's it. And I'm not saying this to be like, oh, I'm so much better. I'm saying it because it's the truth. When you cut all the rest of that crap out, you feel better. You feel better, you look better, life becomes better, everything becomes, it's easier too. Like I just don't get upset by the things that I used to. Other people and what they say, it just doesn't affect me because I know myself. And that's why I share this information. It's why I share everything that I've researched. It's why I share everything that I've done. Well, not everything, but all the things that I've overcome. It's why I talk about addiction. And I mean self-destructive addiction. Good addictions are good because human beings are addictive. There's nothing you can do about that. That's what we're like. We are repetitive, routine-based creatures, and so addiction fits into that. But you got to find addictions that are good for you, that help build you up. They help your life. They make things better for you. That's what you have to do. Do that and things improve. Do things that are self-destructive and things become harder. Any kind of emotional connection becomes very difficult, both to yourself and to others. And none of us, if we don't do these things, we're not living who we truly are. That's why I make the content I make. That's why I do the readings that I do. That's why I do all of these things, because I see the value in it. And I see how far people are from that. And I'm not saying for you to be exactly like me. You're going to be you. But you get to figure out who that is by getting rid of all the crap that distracts you and makes you feel bad about yourself. Right? And ruins connections. But these things have to be faced. You've got to be brave enough to do it. And it's so much more worth it in, it's hard during. Again, it depends on how connected you are to these things and how many under-level sort of areas are kind of attached to it. The attachment is what's difficult to let go of. The patterns, the habits, that's what makes it difficult because you're used to doing it. I have talked about how to break, habitual self-destructive addiction in other movies, how funny, in other videos, and I can definitely talk about that more if people are interested. But yeah, I think I'll leave it there for now. But I might go into more about connection. I know I kind of talked about a few areas, but I feel like all these things are important to take into account if you want to have true connected relationships, both with yourself and with others.